My name is Lottie, and I turned 60 years old last Tuesday. I spent the day packing a suitcase not for a celebratory trip, but because my only daughter, Kimberly, gave me an ultimatum: hand over control of my pension and Social Security, or go back to my lonely old hometown in Kansas. She framed it as financial planning for the family's future, a sensible consolidation. I looked at her, my little girl, all grown up into a woman I barely recognized, and I did not argue. I did not cry. I just smiled, a slow, sad smile that held 60 years of memories, love, and quiet resilience. She knew nothing about, grabbed the suitcase I had already secretly packed, and walked out of her beautiful suburban house for the last time. What she never imagined was that I had been planning my own exit for months, gathering my strength like scattered pearls and stringing them back together one by one. Before I share the whole story of how a 60-year-old woman finds the ground beneath her feet again, I would love to know where you are listening from today. If stories about reclaiming your own narrative in life's later chapters speak to you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe. Your presence here makes this conversation real. The life I left behind was in Wichita, Kansas, in a little blue house with a wide front porch. My husband Frank and I painted that house ourselves the summer after we bought it. The color was called Carolina Skies, and it always made me happy. Frank passed 5 years ago, a sudden heart attack that stole the air from my world. The silence in that house afterward was immense. It had a weight and a sound all its own. But I learned to carry it. I had my routines, my anchors. I worked part-time at the public library long after I officially retired, just for the joy of it. I knew every child who came for Tuesday Story Hour, and I knew which mysteries Mrs. Abernathy would devour each week. My best friend Marjorie lived 3 streets over. Our Thursday morning coffee was sacred. We would sit in her sunroom or on my porch, depending on the weather, and solve the problems of the world. I grew tomatoes and zinnias in my backyard garden. The tomatoes were for sandwiches and salads. The zinnias were for the pure, bursting joy of their color. It was a small life, a quiet life, but it was woven through with purpose and my own choices. My pension from my years working for the state and my Social Security check arrived faithfully. The house was paid for. I felt a deep-seated security, the kind that comes from knowing you can handle your own affairs. Then the calls from California began. Kimberly's voice was always a little frantic, a little breathless. She talked about the girls Chloe and Sophia and the impossible cost and unreliability of after-school care. She talked about Greg's constant business trips. She talked about the pressures of her own job in retail management. "Mom, I am drowning out here," she sobbed during one call. "We have this perfect little guest house, a casita just sitting empty. The girls ask about you all the time. It would solve everything. You could just relax and be grandma." I hesitated. Wichita was my soil. My roots were there. But the image of my grandchildren's faces and the raw need in my daughter's voice pulled at me. I told myself it was temporary, a few months to help them find their balance. I made the decision. Selling the blue house felt like cutting off a limb. The closing was a blur of signatures and a hollow feeling in my chest. Saying goodbye to Marjorie at the airport, she held my face, her eyes serious. "You call me every week, Lottie. No matter what, you are not disappearing." I promised, my throat tight. The arrival in San Diego was like stepping into a postcard. The sunlight was different, brighter, harsher. The air smelled of salt and flowers I could not name. The girls rushed me, all tangled limbs and excited shouts. The casita was charming, a tiny studio with Spanish tile and French doors that opened to a private patio shaded by a bougainvillea. For those first few weeks, it felt like a wonderful extended visit. I was the fun grandma. We built sandcastles at Coronado Beach. I read them stories with different voices. I baked chocolate chip cookies, and the kitchen was filled with warmth and laughter. Kimberly and Greg were grateful, affectionate. I felt needed in the best way. That feeling, that warm glow of being the solution, was the last time I remember feeling truly at home there. The change crept in on soft feet. The vacation atmosphere faded, and a new unspoken schedule took hold. My days took on a predictable shape. I would drive the girls to their elementary school in the morning, my old Corolla feeling out of place among the shiny SUVs. I would return to the main house, where Kimberly would often have a small list. "Mom, if you are going to the post office, could you take this package?" Or, "The dry cleaner is on your way back, right?" Then I would have a few precious hours in the casita before the 3 p.m. school pickup. After school was snacks, then homework at the kitchen table, then starting dinner, so it would be ready when Kimberly and Greg got home. One evening, as I was finishing the dishes, Kimberly came in looking at her phone. Oh, Mom, since you are already in here, would you mind hand washing these pans? The dishwasher ruins the non-stick coating. And maybe give the stovetop a quick wipe. It is looking grubby. It was not a malicious request. It was just an assumption, a smooth absorption of my time and labor into the machinery of their household. I said yes. Then it became folding the enormous load of laundry that tumbled from their machine clothes that were not mine. Then it was organizing the chaos of the playroom, a task that felt like trying to hold back the tide. Greg made a comment one night that landed like a stone. After a particularly hectic evening, he put his arm around Kimberly and said, Honey, I have to say your mom being here is better than me getting that bonus. The money we are saving on childcare and a housekeeper is phenomenal. He said it right in front of me, a financial assessment of my worth. I forced a smile, the first of many that did not reach my eyes. My weekly calls to Marjorie became my oxygen. I would lock the door of the casita, put on my headphones, and whisper into the phone. It is like I have become a permanent fixture, Marjorie. The helpful ghost. I am everywhere and nowhere. Marjorie's voice with its flat Kansas accent was my touchstone. That does not sound like a visit, Lottie. That sounds like a job with no paycheck and no days off. You keep a ledger in your head, you hear me? The final nudge into unease was the money talk. Kimberly approached it with practical warmth. Mom, to streamline things, why do not you just give me $400 a month for groceries? I will do the big shop for the whole house. It will be one less thing for you to worry about. It seemed logical, I agreed. But the following weekend, I watched her unload bags filled with premium steaks, artisanal bread, expensive olives, and bottles of wine that cost more than my weekly grocery budget in Wichita. That night, I ate a simple chicken breast and steamed vegetables I had prepared separately. I realized with a cold clarity that my $400 was not buying my share of groceries. It was subsidizing a gourmet upgrade for their dinners. When I gently mentioned the discrepancy, Kimberly laughed a light dismissive sound. Oh, Mom, do not be so technical. We are sharing. It all comes out in the wash. But it never did. The wash always seemed to leave me with less. A profound loneliness set in, then a colder, deeper loneliness than I had ever felt in my empty house after Frank died. This was the loneliness of being invisible in plain sight, of being valued for your utility, but not yourself. The first real fracture happened on a bright Tuesday at the neighborhood park. I was pushing Sophia on the swing, counting as she went higher, while Chloe practiced cartwheels on the grass. Stepping backwards to watch her, my heel caught the edge of the rubberized curb. My ankle turned over with a sharp, sickening twist. Pain, immediate and white-hot, shot up my leg. I gasped and sat down heavily on the grass. Chloe was at my side in an instant. Grandma, your face is white. Sophia ran over her lower lip, trembling. I assured them I was okay, just needed a minute hobbling to a bench with their concerned help. My hands shook as I called Kimberly. Her phone went to voicemail. I called again. She answered, her voice clipped. Mom, I am in a pre-meeting huddle. What is it? I think I sprained my ankle, Kim. I am at the park with the girls. I heard a sharp intake of breath, then a long sigh. How bad is it? Can you drive? I have a huge client presentation tomorrow morning. I cannot reschedule. I told her I did not think I should drive. Fine, she said the word tight with frustration. I will call Greg, see if he can leave early. Just sit tight. Greg arrived 20 minutes later, his tie loosened but his expression tense. He helped me to the car, his grip efficient. Back at the house, as I sat with a bag of frozen peas on my throbbing ankle, I heard them talking in the kitchen, not bothering to lower their voices. We have to think about this long term, Greg said. What if it had been worse? A broken hip. The liability, Kim, not to mention the care. We are not set up for that. Kimberly's reply was weary. I know, she just needs to be more careful. She is not as agile as she thinks. Their words were not about my pain. They were about risk management, about inconvenience. That moment changed something fundamental. My ankle healed in a few weeks, but my trust did not. After that, Kimberly's suggestions became directives. She began leaving typed lists on my casita door in the morning. It felt like receiving a work order. The list included things like pick up Greg's tailored shirts, Drop off recycling at center. Wait for plumber between 10 and 2. My world, which had once held books and gardens and long phone calls, now existed in the narrow columns of her lists. The talk about my car started soon after. Mom, that Corolla has over 100,000 miles on it. It is not safe for transporting the girls. And the insurance is a ridiculous expense for a car that just sits. We should sell it. You do not need it here. I felt a spike of panic. That car was my tether to independence. I need my car, Kimberly. I like to go to the library, to the botanical gardens. To have my own life, I said, trying to keep my voice even. She looked at me as if I had spoken in a foreign language. Your life is here with us, Mom. Is not that enough? She let it drop, but the seed was planted. The most chilling moment came on a Thursday evening. I had taken the kitchen trash out to the large bins by the garage. The window above the sink was open. I heard Kimberly's voice clear and confiding on a phone call. Oh, she is all right. Just showing her age, little memory slips, forgetting where she put her keys. We are really just trying to step in and help manage things before it becomes a real problem. Make sure her finances are in order. It is a burden, but what can you do? I stood frozen in the gathering dusk, the smell of rotting food in my nostrils. Memory slips, I had never forgotten my keys. She was constructing a narrative, laying the groundwork. I felt a fear so primal, it turned my stomach to ice. That night, I called Marjorie, my voice a trembling whisper. She is building a case, Marge. She is telling people I am losing it. Marjorie was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was low and fierce. Lottie, listen to me. You are in a war you did not start, but you have to fight it, starting right now. First, secure your documents, every last one. Get a lockbox. Then you start learning. You need to know your rights better than she knows her lies. You are not a helpless old woman. You are a fox, and you need to start thinking like one. Her words were a shock, then a catalyst. The next day, I drove to an office supply store and bought a small, fireproof lockbox with a combination lock. That afternoon, while the house was empty, I gathered my life onto the bed, my passport, my birth certificate, my marriage license, Frank's death certificate, the final statement from the sale of my house, every quarterly report from my pension fund, my Social Security award letters, my bank statements, my insurance policies. I placed them all in the box, clicked the lock, and hid it in the bottom of my largest suitcase under a stack of winter sweaters. Then I began my secret education. I told Kimberly I had joined a seniors memoir writing group that met at the public library on Wednesday afternoons. It was a plausible fiction. At the library, I would find a secluded computer carrel in the reference section. With my heart pounding, I would type terms into the search engine. Elder Financial Abuse Statutes, California. Capacity and undue influence. How to protect assets from family members. I read legal aid websites, horror stories from news articles, and empowering guides from senior advocacy groups. I learned the red flags, and I saw every one of them in my own home. I opened a new online-only savings account with a bank Kimberly had never heard of. Slowly, carefully, over the next 2 months, I initiated transfers from my old checking account in Kansas. $200 here, $300 there. It was my escape fund, and watching it grow gave me a sliver of steel for a spine. The confrontation came on a Friday 6 months after my arrival. The air was sweet with night-blooming jasmine. The girls were asleep, exhausted from a week of school and a promised movie night with Grandma. I had just settled in the casita with a book when Kimberly texted, "Can you come to the living room? We need to chat." A ball of cold lead formed in my stomach. When I entered, Greg was on the sofa and Kimberly was perched on the armrest. The coffee table held her iPad, a notepad, and 2 pens. It looked like a business meeting. "Mom, sit." Kimberly said, her smile bright but brittle. "We have been doing some family financial planning, and Greg has put together something really exciting." Greg leaned forward, his demeanor earnest. "Lottie, in today's economy, fragmentation is weakness. Consolidation is strength. We have a unique opportunity here to pool our resources, streamline our expenses, and build a stronger financial future for the entire family unit, especially for Chloe and Sophia's education." He spoke in a smooth, practiced patter. He pulled up charts on the iPad showing hypothetical growth curves. It was impersonal and cold. Kimberly took over. "So the practical step is simplicity itself. You will add Greg and me as joint owners on your bank and investment accounts. To make it truly seamless, you can just give us your pension and Social Security debit cards. We will deposit everything into a new family household account. All the bills, your rent here, everything gets paid from one place. And you will get a generous cash allowance every month for your personal things. No more headaches for you. I sat very still. You want my pension card? My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. For safekeeping and efficiency, yes. Kimberly nodded as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. It is the modern way. It protects you. It helps us all. Think of the security. And if I prefer to keep my affairs separate, I asked. The temperature in the room dropped. Kimberly's smile vanished. Well, Mom, then, we have to be realistic. This living arrangement is based on mutual support and being a team. If you are not part of the team financially, it is not a sustainable model. If you need complete autonomy, you would probably be happier and financially more secure back in Kansas. The cost of living is manageable there. Greg chimed in, his voice reasonable. The equity from your Wichita house sale would give you a very comfortable cushion. You could buy a nice little condo, cash. They had it all figured out. Pay up with my financial freedom or be sent back to pasture. In that suspended second, all the fear, the research, the secret phone calls, the small transfers of money, it all coalesced into a single, unshakable knowing. The paralysis broke. I looked at my daughter's face, now set in lines of impatient expectation, and I felt an immense, sorrowful calm. I smiled. It was not a smile of agreement. It was the smile of a prisoner who has just found the key she hid in her own shoe. Okay, I said, my voice quiet but clear. Kimberly's shoulders relaxed. She exhaled in triumph. I knew you would see it was for the best. Absolutely, I said, standing up. I see everything very clearly now. I turned and walked toward the hallway. Where are you going? Kimberly asked, a note of confusion returning. To get my things, I said without looking back. The casita was dark and cool. I did not turn on the overhead light, just the small lamp by the bed. My movements were precise, practiced in my mind a dozen times. I went to the closet, moved the hanging clothes aside, and pulled out the large, hard-sided suitcase. I had packed it fully a week prior after a day where Kimberly had criticized the way I loaded the dishwasher. It held my best clothes, my jewelry box with pieces from Frank, the photo albums of my parents and my life before California, my own pillow. The lockbox was a solid weight at the bottom. I zipped it closed, extended the handle, and wheeled it to the door. I put on my comfortable walking shoes, grabbed my purse and the light cardigan from the hook. When I re-entered the main house's hallway, Kimberly and Greg were both standing. Kimberly's eyes darted from my face to the suitcase and back. Her expression cycled from confusion to disbelief to dawning furious comprehension. What is this? What are you doing? Exactly what you suggested, Kimberly. I said, my voice steady. I am choosing to exercise my financial independence elsewhere. You cannot be serious. It is night. Her voice climbed. What about tomorrow? What about the girls? My Monday is ruined. I am their grandmother. I repeated the phrase, now a shield. I am not their employee. Your schedule is your responsibility to manage, just like my money is mine. I began walking toward the grand front door. Greg moved quickly, planting himself in my path. Now, Lottie, let us all just take a breath. This is an emotional overreaction. We can discuss this like adults in the morning. There is nothing to discuss, Greg. The terms were non-negotiable. I have made my choice. Now please get out of my way. He was a large man, but he was unprepared for the quiet, absolute certainty in my eyes. He glanced at Kimberly, who was staring open-mouthed, and he faltered. He stepped aside. Kimberly rushed forward as my hand touched the doorknob. This is betrayal. After we opened our home to you, all we asked for was a little cooperation for the family. I turned the suitcase between us like a boundary marker. You did not open your home, Kimberly. You hired a live-in nanny and cook and offered payment in guilt and obligation, and you did not ask for cooperation. You demanded surrender. Now I am leaving. The most loving thing I can do for myself, and maybe for you, is to leave. Then I did the thing that nearly broke my resolve. I walked back down the hall to the girls' bedroom. They were deep in sleep, Sophia clutching a stuffed unicorn, Chloe, with an arm flung over her head. The nightlight cast a soft glow on their perfect faces. My heart cracked. I leaned down and kissed each damp forehead, whispering words of love only they could hear in their dreams. From my purse, I took two small sealed envelopes I had prepared weeks before each, with their name in my loopy script containing a short note and a crisp $10 bill for a treat. I placed them on the dresser, a tiny piece of my heart left behind. Then I walked out. I hefted the suitcase into the trunk of my Corolla. The engine turned over with its familiar, reliable rumble. I did not allow myself to look in the rearview mirror until I was 3 blocks away. Then I pulled over under a streetlight and wept. I cried for the shattered illusion of a family merged for the daughter I had somehow raised to see me as a resource for the grandchildren I was leaving in the crossfire. I cried until my ribs ached. Then I wiped my face, put the car in drive, and followed the signs to the interstate. I drove for an hour before exiting at a town I had never heard of. The motel was called the Sunset Inn. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and strong cleaner. It was the most beautiful place I had ever seen. It was mine. The first call I made was to Marjorie. "It is done, Marge. I am out. I am in a motel." There was a long pause, then a shuddering sigh of relief. "Oh, thank the Lord. Are you safe? Are you hurt?" "I am safe. I am raw, but I am safe." "What do I do now?" "Now you drive, sweetheart. You remember my friend Eleanor from my book club years ago? She moved to Sedona. She helps run a co-housing community for folks our age. They have a little lending library that has been needing a volunteer soul to run it. Comes with a studio apartment. Rent is a song. I have been talking to her for weeks, just in case. She is expecting your call." I sat on the edge of the scratchy motel bedspread, tears welling up again, but this time from a profound, staggering gratitude. "You had this ready?" "Of course I did," Marjorie said, her voice thick with emotion. "You are my sister. I was not going to let you drown without throwing you a life preserver. I just did not know when you would be ready to grab it. You threw it at the perfect time." The drive from Southern California to Arizona was a journey through the landscape of my own soul. I drove through dusty passes and wide valleys, the radio playing old country songs that spoke of heartache and resilience. I stopped at a roadside stand and bought a basket of dates that tasted like caramel. I ate dinner alone in a diner, and for the first time, I did not feel lonely. I felt purposeful. I was an arrow shot from a bow, and I did not yet know where I would land, but I was in flight. Sedona appeared like a miracle, the red rocks rising from the earth like ancient wise beings. Juniper Ridge was a cluster of tan adobe buildings nestled against a hillside. Eleanor met me at the community garden, her hands dirty from planting. She had a wild silver braid and eyes that crinkled at the corners. "Lottie," she said, enfolding me in a hug that smelled of sage and soil. "Welcome home." The studio was small, just one room with a kitchenette and a bathroom, but it had a porch that looked out onto a breathtaking vista of red rock spires against an endless blue sky. It was more than enough. It was everything. The library was a single sun-drenched room attached to the common house. It had maybe 500 books, a couple of armchairs, and a card catalog that was delightfully archaic. My task was to organize it, host a weekly coffee hour, and be a friendly presence. It was not a job, it was a gift. I began to rebuild, slowly. I alphabetized the fiction section. I met Walter, a retired geologist who gave me a crystal of azurite and explained how the red rocks formed. I met Dolores, a former dancer with a hip replacement, who taught me gentle stretches for my now chronically sore ankle. We were a community of repaired people of second and third acts. The pain did not vanish. Kimberly's calls were a torrent. First, rage. "You are a selfish woman. How could you do this to your family?" Then guilt. "The girls cry every night. They do not understand why you left." Finally, threat. "I have consulted an attorney. We are exploring a conservatorship given your irrational behavior and financial mismanagement." That word conservatorship was a knife. I took the messages to Eleanor. She simply nodded and said, "Let me call Ben." Ben Yates was a retired attorney who volunteered his time for residents. He had a grandfatherly demeanor, but eyes that missed nothing. He helped me draft a response not from a frightened mother, but from a competent adult. The letter stated unequivocally that I was of sound mind, under no duress, fully capable of managing my affairs, and that I revoked any implied consent for financial involvement. It cited California law regarding elder financial abuse and stated that any further attempts to pursue conservatorship would be met with a vigorous and costly legal defense, for what would clearly be a malicious and frivolous action. He sent it on his professional letterhead. The silence that followed was profound. It was the sound of a door slamming shut, a door I had needed to close. I began to live, not just exist. I joined the community garden, adopting a small plot where I grew lavender and hardy desert wildflowers. I got a card at the magnificent Sedona Public Library and would lose hours in the reading nooks. I bought a set of watercolors from the local art store and tried, with clumsy, hopeful strokes, to capture the way the light hit the cliffs at dawn. The grief for the relationship I lost with Kimberly became a quiet companion, not a screaming one. I learned to hold it without letting it drown me. Months later, Kimberly permitted a video call with the girls. Their faces, bigger now, filled my screen. "Grandma, your hair is longer. You look happy. Are those mountains behind you?" I showed them my view, my little library, my lavender plant. I told them I sent my love on the wings of the hawks that circled the mesa. In the corner of the screen, Kimberly's face was a stone mask. It was not a reconciliation. It was an armed truce. It was real. Now, as I sit on my little porch in the cool hour before sunset, a mug of chamomile tea in my hands, I look out at the mesa turning rose gold. The desert air is so quiet I can hear the rustle of a lizard in the gravel. Inside my tiny home is in order. The library is ready for tomorrow's coffee hour. Walter and Dolores are coming over for pizza later. My life has contracted in geography but expanded in spirit in ways I could never have imagined. Every dime I spend is my choice. Every book on my shelf is one I chose. The lesson I carry from that year is not about wicked children or the evils of money. It is about the sacred geometry of self-respect. Love, real love, is not a transaction, and it is not a dissolution of self. It requires boundaries as surely as a beautiful garden requires a fence, not to keep love out, but to define the space where it can grow healthy and strong. What my daughter called love was possession. What she called help was control. I had to learn that saying no, especially to someone you love, is not the end of love. Sometimes it is the only thing that can save its last fragile ember. Setting that boundary was the most agonizing thing I have ever done. It felt like tearing out my own heart, but it was also the most authentic, the most necessary. I had to show my daughter, and more importantly, I had to prove to myself that I was not an asset to be managed. I was a woman to be reckoned with, still capable of writing her own story. To anyone out there listening who feels the slow creep of obligation, erasing your own lines, who hears the voice saying, "You are too old to change, too invested to leave, too kind to say no," I am here as a witness. Your next chapter is not written yet. It might begin with a difficult conversation, a secret savings account, a classified ad for a small apartment, or just the silent, firm decision to stop saying yes when you mean no. It is never, ever too late to redefine what home means. And it is always wise to have a friend who will help you pack a secret suitcase and a plan you have practiced in the quiet of your own mind. Now, I would be so honored to hear from you. Have you ever faced a moment where you had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your peace of mind? How did you navigate that crossroads? Please share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be the lifeline someone else needs to hear. If this story touched a place in your heart, please give this video a like. It lets me know these shared truths matter. Subscribe to this channel for more conversations about courage, family, and finding your footing at any age. And if you know someone who is feeling trapped in a situation that diminishes them, please share this with them. Sometimes, knowing you are not alone is the first step toward the door. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening. Wherever you are, whatever you are facing, I wish you the gentle strength to honor your own boundaries and the profound peace that comes from living a life that is truly, completely your own.